Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Since this is a psychology YouTube channel, keep in mind that everything we get into might become triggering for some people. Watch with care, of course, and let's watch.
Bart, you turned me from a boy to a man.
Do you think we resolved the issue?
I think we resolved the issue. Sometimes I come across flirty, but it comes across the wrong way.
All right, so they're having a conversation after the fight they had about her saying that she has taught him everything that he knows. He made a joke about her turning him from a boy to a man. She didn't laugh at it. We've seen that before where he will joke about something that I think he has a legitimate beef with, but he hasn't seemingly had an upfront conversation about it, said he'll make a little joke about it as a passive way, I think, of protesting. And then she says, have we resolved it? And then he launches into his own issues. I would hope that she would balance it out at the very least by talking about what she did wrong or what she needs to change, which isn't the pattern. Arguably, that entire argument had nothing to do with him. I mean, that was even her narrative in the end, was he had done nothing wrong.
So it's been an adjustment trying to, change for you.
So you're trying to change your flirtation for me?
I'm trying to change my personality for you, yes.
So by me asking you not to flirt with other women, I'm changing your personality?
I wasn't flirting with, but that's what it came across to you.
In this experiment, sometimes you have tests.
All right, she's talking in a business-like fashion, and she was seemingly scrutinizing his phrasing or maybe what he meant instead of working with him and collaborating with him. So hopefully she says, is it resolved what I did to you because I yelled at you, even though I admitted later that you had done nothing wrong? Are we resolved on that?
And it was a test that I think that you failed. But just as long as you
I didn't even get a D. I failed.
Okay, so she said that in relationships there are tests. Is that what she said? Let's rewind.
But that's what it came across to you.
In this experiment, sometimes you have tests, and it was a test that I think that you failed.
In this experiment, sometimes there are tests, and yeah, depends on what you mean by tests, but I think she might mean that it's another aspect of her teaching him and looking down on him and considering him to be incompetent and her to be inherently mature and competent compared to him. So that first statement, I think, is her way of trying to justify to herself and to him that she is testing him. People will do that. They will have these phrases that on the surface might seem like they make sense, but when you look at it, you're thinking, no. What you mean by that actually is setting a foundation of justifying something that should not be justified, or at the very least should be questioned. So those kinds of statements of some, in this experiment, there are tests. So we've established that, and you failed. Because if she just came out and said you failed, then she might, feel like she's not standing on a foundation. It's a pretty weak foundation to begin with, if not non-existent. But anyway, so then she says, you failed. I'm trying to figure out what he failed. Earlier, she had said that he had done, he asked her, did I do anything wrong? She's like, no, you did nothing wrong. He failed how? Because he flirted, and he is saying that he comes across as flirty, and he needs to change that. And then he kind of clarified that by saying he's not actually flirting. It just comes across as flirting to you. So I'm trying to, that's one. So I think he's referring to both the Katie at the party and the woman at the duck situation. But the woman at the duck situation, he wasn't, I don't think there's any way to interpret that as flirting. He was socializing with a random person who came up to him. I mean, unless you believe that every interaction between a woman and a man is inherently flirty, Like if it was a dude that had done that with him, would everyone be going, oh, that was flirtation? It's like, isn't it just people joking around at a party? Usually people people are drinking when they're in those kinds of resort situations and you're just trying to have a good time. Anyway, so he is told that he failed the test. What test? She doesn't even know what they talked about. Now, I think she would absolutely have a problem with the things he was saying to her, because from my memory, the things he was saying to Katie were flirty or were very complimentary to Katie, telling her how great she is and everything. And I don't think that Nick was flirting necessarily. I think he was slipping into a mode. But anyway, let's see how this goes.
Just as long as
I didn't even get a D. I failed.
as long as you don't fail again.
Well, that's what I don't want to fail you. Hopefully I don't fail this.
We'll see, Nick.
It just gets worse and worse. What did he fail? I think they're agreeing that he failed in the way he was talking to Katie. And if she actually knew what was being said, I think she might have a thing or two to say about that. It's debatable whether or not it would have been a problem. But in their world, I think it would be a problem. But she doesn't know that. She doesn't know what they talked about. She hasn't seen the show. She will have by the time, these episodes are aired, but that's a year later. So all she knows is that the two of them were talking for a while, and that's part of the expected thing to happen at these events. And he, after the party, said, "I'm with you, Hannah. I don't want to be with Katie. I love you. I'm going to marry you." So nothing happened between me and Katie. And she was reassured by that, at least seemingly. So it's just so interesting that it gets shoehorned in once again to "you have failed." And that really just points to how this is not about testing or failing or maturity or teaching. This is about a template that is being applied, a projective identification that is being projected, and he is being forced to identify. He's being socialized to match her projection, which is one of incompetence, which I think derives from her own background in her teenage life and maybe soon after teenage life, in which I'm guessing that she was made to feel small, immature, and incompetent. And she is now applying that model to this relationship. The reason why I say all that is because, in terms of what she knew and what she was being told, they just had a conversation, and she initially, after the party, was going on the attack, but it was passive. And then she eventually pulled back and said, "Well, really, I'm mad at Katie." And then she said, "My shoes look psychotic," or "My feet look psychotic." And then she's like, "Let's go to bed together." And then she walks out and stonewalls. And then he says, "Hey, are we going to talk about this?" Silence, silence, silence. "Hey, I'd like to talk about this." Silence, silence, silence. And then eventually he's like, "Did I do anything wrong?" And she's like, "No, you didn't do anything wrong." He's like, "Okay, I didn't think I did anything wrong." So to go from that to "you failed," you failed, Nick. To go from that to "I tested you and you failed." Delulu?
Loved anyone before. Think when you meet the right person, you kind of know.
You think you're ready to marry me?
I think so. Yeah. Do you think you're ready?
so.
You think?
Do you think you're ready to marry me?
I do want to marry you. Like,
Yeah.
I would love to marry you. It's just sometimes I just question things that makes me think if we should get married. Do you know what I mean?
I have some flaws that I have to work on. It doesn't mean I'm not.
Okay, I thought she was going to say, "I do want to marry you, but you have a lot to learn," or something. But she didn't say that. She just said it's a question mark, and that sounds like a no at the altar. But yeah, especially given how their relationship has gone, I think at the very least it would be understandable and wise to have a question mark as to whether or not you should get married. I mean, it's just interesting that this show moves the needle in a particular direction such that I sometimes forget what's happening. If we just forget of Love is Blind and that there's a wedding coming up, would anyone say, "Yeah, these two should get married next week"? No, I can't imagine a single person saying, oh yeah, definitely you should get married. No one would think that, right? So, of course, I would hope she would have questions. Not necessarily that he is a problem, but at the very least that this relationship might not be best for either one of us. We might not be compatible. There's already a lot of issues.
Not ready for marriage. It doesn't mean I don't love you, but we've had a couple of situations where I felt like the conversation was harmless. And from your perspective, it was a little more than that.
I know that a fault sometimes is that I am a little bit too direct, and sometimes it can come off as like malicious or rude, but like when
yeah, it's a very common defense and distortion that we've heard many times on reality TV. She's saying, I'm not wrong, I'm just direct. So that's a way of acknowledging that there's something there, but it's still completely in the camp of I'm right and he's wrong. I'm just direct. I'm just blunt. I'm just a straight shooter. I just have to tell the truth. That's not how it looks.
you know me, you know that's actually coming from the most kind place of heart.
Well, and the truth hurts sometimes.
The truth does
let's
hurt
be real.
sometimes.
Everyone wants that, like,
I'm a
complete,
truth
straight
teller,
honesty
baby.
and-
Yep. Did I not say that as one of them? I'm a truth teller. By your own definition, you're not a truth teller. You went on the attack after the party and then later said that he had done nothing wrong and you were only upset at Katie. So that's not the truth. You were not telling the truth. And to say that you've taught him everything you know is not the truth. It's not possible. To say that you took him from a boy to a man is not the truth, right? The truth is to say something, well, but honestly, I can't imagine any scenario in which a spouse who was not harmful would believe, hey, sometimes I just have to tell the truth. If you're in a zone where you're reassuring yourself or justifying yourself that you're telling, maybe if your partner was suffering from an addiction or your partner was abusive or something, maybe. But I don't think many people would frame it as, look, I'm just a truth teller. I think if you are trying to reassure yourself that hey, I'm just a blunt person. Hey, I come from a culture in which we saw that during Queer Love, right? Between, I can't remember the couple, their name, but one of them was saying that she was blunt, right? It's like, well, my culture's really blunt. And then the other woman is saying something like, your culture isn't abusive or something like that. I can't remember the zinger that happened, but those kind of statements of like, hey, I'm just a blunt person, and sometimes my spouse doesn't want it. Sometimes the truth hurts. No, the truth doesn't have to hurt. Under normal circumstances in a spousal relationship, if the truth hurts, then either it's not the truth or you're delivering it like an asshole. That's what you're saying, is you're an asshole when you're saying that. You can deliver the truth, if it is the truth, in a way that doesn't hurt people's feelings on a chronic basis.
Until like they have it. Thank you.
So basically, like, Nick went to go ride this like duck, and I was like, that's gonna give me the ick, Nick, but like I'm gonna start calling you like freaking Icky Nicky, but go ride the freaking duck. And
Wow. Just so big. Oh. Anyone in her shoes would know that Nick is at a disadvantage, a massive disadvantage. It's her friends. And she immediately goes down this road of semi-delusional or distorted notions and narratives that are not based in reality and are designed to ridicule him, to put him down, to make him lower, to make her seem higher. Ironically, it's the opposite, because that's how defenses work, is they shoot us in the foot. So she's doing that. Her friends are agreeing with her, which makes me wonder if this is a common narrative that they're having. But the first few times I saw this, I was put off. But now this is like nails on a chalkboard. This is crossing a line into abuse, honestly. And the way he's reacting, he's like, oh, and given how accommodating and fawning he is, it's looking like I don't know about them. I would have to see more. I'd have to ask him how he's receiving this, but this is what abuse looks like. This is what this type of abuse will look like, of distorted, semi-delusional attacks and ridicule. And at the first ability that the perpetrator has power, they lean into the power. If she were not this way, then she would actually pull back on this because she would feel more power, more agency, and would want to adjust for his benefit, or at the very least, don't capitalize on the fact that I have him in a corner. But the fact that it's understood that he is in a corner and that he's at the disadvantage, and she decides to kick him when he's down, right? He's automatically down, and she's just, it's hard to watch, right? There's moments of like, oh, that was interesting, or, oh, that was revealing. And now this is actually hard to watch.
So basically, like, Nick went to go ride this, like, duck, and I was like, that's gonna give me the ick Nick, but, like, I'm gonna start calling you, like, freaking Icky Nicky. But
And then the name calling, we haven't heard that, Icky Nicky. One, I talked a little bit about the ick the first time this came up, and this is I don't know what she means by it or the concept of it for her, but the way I see it being used, and it's used in a variety of ways, but the way that it seemingly has evolved in our culture is for certain groups of people to use it as a way of diagnosing, really, that, well, that person people used to use the word like creep or something, but it is kind of a newer concept. And I think it actually is born out of a good movement of helping people, and particularly women, in trusting their gut when they are with someone who is dangerous or harmful in some way. And then later it would become revealed that their gut was trying to tell them something. And so there was, there's always been a fair amount of energy around that movement of awareness and advocacy. And with over the past 10 years on the internet and conversations, there's been more conversations along those lines. And then I feel like out of that were some branching sub-ideas, sub-concepts, one of which is the ick. And the way that it seems to be used, and we saw Irina kind of do this with Zach, is that I'm feeling what I'm calling the ick. It's some sort of disgust that I have with this man. I don't think I've ever heard a guy say ick, but that's just my cultural pocket, so what do I know? But if we just say that it's a woman in this instance, it's like I'm feeling disgust, or I'm feeling something bad and I'm interpreting it as disgust, and therefore it's the ick, and you are the ick. It's not I'm just having a feeling, like you're doing something with a duck and it's no big deal, and I have a problem. I might feel icky, I might feel disgust, but it's not right? It's just an ick. It's just funny. It's not, I'm feeling an ick. It's, I'm feeling the ick, which I think is their way of saying this is inherently icky and you are icky. And that's why I think it is an evolution of that original idea of trust your gut when you're on a date with someone and someone is making you feel unsafe, or someone is like, hey, we should go back to my place, and you just don't really feel quite right, but you're too accommodating because society has told you as a woman you have to appease everybody, and so you go and something bad happens, and then you're, I should have listened to my gut. And it's that notion of like that my gut is identifying something, that you are something. It's not just a feeling that I'm having. It's like some sort of radar that is detecting a thing. And so I am feeling the ick and you are the ick. Because the original idea was I'm feeling unsafe. My gut is trying to tell me something because you are unsafe, which, it might be actually wise advice at times, But as it gets to the ick, I think that it's a problematic term, or it's used in a problematic way. At the very least, it limits the people who ascribe to that notion. is extremely limiting for someone to have a feeling, to route it into a cultural phenomenon or a cultural notion without investigating it and wondering, well, what is the feeling exactly? Because I don't think it was discussed. I think her feeling was disrespect. She felt as though he was not being loyal, that he wasn't under her umbrella, that he was acting in a way that she just didn't feel was becoming of a fiance or something. That's the word, disrespect. If she just would have stuck to that, then there's an avenue of exploration, at the very least self-awareness. But instead it's icky nicky. And then that name calling, not okay. To take that's and I just want to point out, extremely immature to call anyone some kind of name like that, let alone your fiance. And we see certain politicians that will do this, that will name people in a very dismissive, immature, harmful, self-aggrandizing manner. It's a narcissistic thing to name someone. If you've ever had someone say, "Oh, your name is Josephine, well, I'm going to call you Joe," and you're like, "No, don't call me Joe." And they're like, "No, I think that's a better name for you. I'm just going to call you Joe." That is a very narcissistic thing to do, right? It's like, well, I want to call you Joe, so your name is now Joe. It's like, wow, you've just erased my name because you want to call me something. And so that's what nicknaming is, especially if it's done non-consensually, right? If someone wants a nickname or they like the nickname you're giving them or they're asking you, call me this nickname, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, it's great. But to impose a nickname, particularly if it's a harmful one, in front of your friends,
So basically, like, Nick went to go ride this, like, duck, and I was like, that's gonna give me the ick Nick, but, like, I'm gonna start calling you, like, freaking icky Nicky, but go ride the freaking duck. And he went over to ride.
It looked cool.
And then some, like, woman, like, gets on there with him, and then the woman's, like, looks at me, and she's like, oh, look at your girl, she's so jealous. And I was like, and then Nick was like, oh, I'm so funny. And I was like, oh, yeah.
My God. If they were talking about another story, maybe this would be in the zone of non-cringe, but she's telling a new narrative now, because originally her narrative, her false memory or something was, and then she was like, don't be a jealous person, you bitch, or something like that. And now it's someone, the demeanor is more sarcastic. So it's interesting that the story is evolving in her mind. She's saying, what was her demeanor?
Oh, look at your girl, she's so jealous.
Oh, look. I mean, at least that's closer to what we saw in the edit. And, we all remember through a filter, but even, her misremembering is, I think, understandable. Why are you bringing this up? What's the point? And that's one of the things about systems and relational therapists. We are trained to pay attention to meta-communication, or what is being communicated above and beyond the verbal language. So if we look at the verbatim, she's just telling a story, but what's really being communicated? And we could speculate that what is being intended to be communicated and what's being received by her friends and by Nick this is just me watching it. I can't know, but I think what's being communicated is he is ridiculous and I'm better than him, and he has all these problems that are really quite deplorable or silly or something. Actually, when I talk it out loud, it's like, what are you communicating? That you're dumb for having picked him because you're engaged to him? Or is she trying to set them up? So this is a guess that she's trying to tell her friends subtly or unconsciously, I'm actually not wanting to marry this guy. So let me just communicate that through the stories that I tell you. Don't worry, I'm not really going to marry him. or she's embarrassed about him, even though she doesn't have to be, and she's trying to get out ahead of that. That kind of feels accurate, by making fun of him and saying, yeah, I know he's ridiculous, and let me tell you how ridiculous he is. I'm on board with how stupid and incompetent and ridiculous. It doesn't make any of it okay, of course, but I'm just trying to figure out what's being communicated. Or she now has the power because her friends are there, and he's a fourth wheel, and he is now powerless, and now she's going to use this power as an opportunity to blast him, which I think also holds water.
And I was like, and then Nick was like, oh, I'm so funny.
And then the way she tells this story, it's just so immature, mocking, hurtful, inaccurate. I mean, it's hard to know what she's saying because she's doing body language, but at the very least, if I were Nick, I would be really hurt by this. One, why are you bringing this up? And do you really want me? Do you really want to get into this? Because I can defend myself. I can say, okay, well, let me tell you my side of the story. I'm sure you're not going to believe me. Although her friends, like Cade, her brother, might be totally knowledgeable about who Hannah is. In fact, they probably are. So if Nick were to defend himself, they might actually say, well, yeah, Hannah can be a jerk sometimes.
And I was like,
Oh yeah, see, I wouldn't have thought that was funny.
it wasn't funny.
I wouldn't have thought it was funny.
It's tough for me because I feel like I'm having to change a lot about the type of man I am. And now it's like, well, damn, like maybe, I'm not mature enough, right? Which I think I am for a marriage. I'm questioning myself now. Like,
you think I'm trying to change you?
Yeah. I said this last time that is a sign of gaslighting. When someone has a self-concept that is not unreasonable and they start to question their ability to judge who they are and what they are. Now, he's not the most mature in terms of what we've seen, but honestly, if the topic of maturity hadn't been brought up, I don't know if I certainly wouldn't have been this focused on it, or it wouldn't have been highlighted in his behavior, especially post pods. There's various different ideas about what maturity is or means, but we just heard that in his language. He's like, well, I thought I was mature enough. And I think that the word mature is a stand-in for, I thought I was ready. I thought I have the wisdom, enough understanding of what love is or something to get married. But now I'm wondering if I'm not, because of the way that she has been talking to him. And it would be understandable for him to think that, especially if there's no one around to say, hey, you have to protect yourself against what she is telling you and her campaign of breaking you down, which would still not help him necessarily. But if he doesn't have that, then he's completely lost, and he would just have his own somewhat undeveloped sense of who he is in terms of maturity, because he's talked about how he hasn't been in many, if any, long-term relationships, right? I think he said he's never been in love before, so this is his first time, and even if he's like, well, I don't really feel like I'm immature or that I'm acting all that bad, but what do I know? I've never been in a long-term relationship, and the one person that I love, the one person I want to get married to, she knows me better than a lot of other people do, and well, she's been saying these things, and although I think she goes too far sometimes, where there's smoke, there's fire, so there must be something about, why would she be so unrelentingly telling me all these things about myself? There must be some truth to it, and then you have this conflict between, well, my emerging understanding of myself is here, but I'm being told something else. Well, what gives? Well, maybe, and what you'd hope is like, well, maybe the other person isn't right. Maybe they're on a mission to see me this way or something. Maybe there's like 1% truth to what they're saying. Or you can say, well, maybe I just don't know how to gauge myself. I don't know how to evaluate my own faculties, my own strengths, my own maturity. And when you start to question that, that's gaslighting. That's gaslighting. All right. Well, if you are trying to ask me a question or contact me, the best way, and maybe really the only way, is through the website. You can go to psychologyinseattle.com and click on the contact button, and there's a form there that you can fill out. And by doing that, it is very likely to be seen by one of us and possibly seen by me. And other ways of trying to contact me are not reliable. If you DM me through Patreon, that also is like a sort of a distant second. But really, sorry, I just took a drink of my Coke here and had a bit of a bubble there. But other ways I don't really check because I don't want to give the impression that I am contactable through there, because sometimes I won't look for a month and then people are upset. So I feel like I just have to say, what are the ways in which I want people to contact me that I will commit to making sure that I actually check on at least a weekly basis, or I don't know, sometimes it's every couple of weeks, but it's through those two ways. And so that's the way you can do that. Also, if you are a patron or a YouTube member, you're more likely to have your email sent to me, through the website, because it asks you if you're a patron or a member. And if you're wanting me to respond to a question on the air, on the audio podcast, then I'm much more likely to do that if you are a patron or a YouTube member. We get a lot of emails, so I have to figure out some way of prioritizing, and that seems like the logical thing to do. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.